Good afternoon. So my name is Tamieka Atkins, and I'm the Executive Director of Pro Georgia. Pro Georgia is part of the State Voices Network. We are one of 20 tables that focuses on access, engagement, and representation in our democracy for communities of color, for new American majority folks, for marginalized and underrepresented communities. We do our work with our 35 partner organizations through the theory of collective impact, which is simply that, we are not going to build an equitable democracy if our organizations work in silos, in isolation, and that we are stronger as a progressive movement if we are working together on one single issue. We coordinate the voter registration and civic engagement activities for our 35 partners so that we can be more effective, that we are reaching all of our communities that we need to reach, that we are able to stretch our dollars, right, so that we can get the most for our money. And that also that we're tying the voter reg and civic engagement to the issues that matter most to our communities so that they can continue to hold elected officials accountable during the legislative session and for the balance of the year. So this is when we talk about integrated voter engagement. We are there year round and our partners are trusted messengers. Which is why, when it comes to 2020 census, and I, don't want to repeat so much of what the first panel talked about, but if we want, like census data just informs Georgia representation in Congress, voting district lines, the enforcement of civil rights laws, and it determines the funding on issues like education, healthcare, and infrastructure, right? And these are all issues that matter the most to our communities. Because we have been doing voter registration and civic engagement in what have already been deemed hard to count communities, our partners already have the relationships and their trusted messengers on the ground to now overlay, get out the count work on top of their traditional civic engagement and get out the vote work. Our plans for 2020 are 3 areas: advocacy and education, funding, and then also capacity building. Around advocacy and education, some of our partners have been working with local counties to encourage their participation in LUCA, the local update of census addresses. At this point, we're happy to say that 152 counties out of 159 are participating in LUCA. All of the major counties that have the highest density of people of color in the state are already actively participating in LUCA, and we will continue to campaign with the last 7 counties to get them to also participate, sign up to participate in LUCA. We're also working on the citizenship question. Our partners are asking for support, advice, funding to help investigate what's the messaging that's going to work best to encourage disenfranchised communities to fill out the census, considering the citizenship question. This is a challenge that we have not yet accurately addressed, and we are definitely looking for partnership with funders like the Bowman Foundation and the FCCP to help us fund some of that investigative research. We want to make sure that we, using the trusted messengers on the ground, that we have the right tools and we have the right communication strategy to really build trust with folks, to encourage them to complete the census work. We're also working with the complete count committees. We're working with the governor's office to establish a statewide complete count committee, and we're working to get the backing where we can provide recommendations on who should be on the committees. Some of our partners like the Coalition for the People's Agenda and Galeo, Georgia Association for Latino Elected Officials, already has some sway with the governor's office. So we're working to build a joint plan and give a list of organizations and businesses that should be included in the census conversation. We are also increasing partnerships in Georgia with 20 groups who currently do not belong to Pro Georgia. So establishing a census table that would include faith organizations, healthcare associations, business leaders, school districts, and some non-traditional nonprofits that don't typically do voter registration and civic engagement. We are also reaching out to a few Fortune 500 companies that we have here in Georgia, Home Depot, UPS, and Coca-Cola. So these are Fortune 500 companies that have supported communities of color in the past in Georgia, and including them as a part of this Complete Count Committee conversation. We're also looking to identify and recruit additional trusted messengers within the community to fill some Census Bureau enumerator positions. Our partners are working to secure regrants for census and redistricting outreach so that we can hire 3 full-time census organizers to support all of the coordinated census work for the 35 table partners, 2 in more southern rural Georgia, and 1 in the kind of metropolitan area where, again, about 68% of all people of color live in the 13 metropolitan counties. This doesn't include all of the on-the-ground field work, where we'll be conducting over 40 trainings with our partner organizations to do some education so that they can turn around and work with all of their membership organizations on why the census, what it means in terms of dollars, their immediate community, who needs to be counted, which includes children. We are developing the workshops so that our partners don't have to create them themselves. And we'll be providing funding to them so that they can embed this training in all of their ongoing workshops and leadership development opportunities that they already have with their members. The last piece about this is requesting the funding on the federal and the state level. We want to make sure that the census is fully funded. Our partners are working with 50 influencers, all elected officials, to put pressure and have a petition signed to encourage our state and then also our federal government to fully fund the census in Georgia. So we have a pretty robust plan. Luckily, none of us are doing it in isolation. We're doing it together. And it's going to require us, in order for us to reach over 100,000 community members through pledge cards in our 13 counties that we've already identified with hard to count communities that our partners have already been working in, that this is going to be definitely, it's going to be a lot. And it's going to be an upward battle, but it's important that to note that several of our partner organizations, this is not their first go around working on census. And I think what has been a really shiny kind of bright thing for People's Agenda, Center for Pan Asian Community Services, Asian Americans Advancing Justice, is that this time they're part of this larger infrastructure that are all working to reach the same communities. And so we just have more opportunity and more chance for success now than we did 10 years ago.
Great, thank you so much, Tamieka. The volume and was like super clear. So I'm glad that we got that fixed, but you sounded great. I'm gonna pause for a moment because we have a question that has come through. And so I will kick this question to both Stacy and Tamieka, but then ask Claire and Ashley to address it in your comments. But can you speak a little bit about how your year-round power building strategy dovetails with your census work? So Tamieka, you talked a little bit about integrated voter engagement and a movement building. So how does the census work really feed into that power building work?
Well, so one thing I can say is, just as an example, this year, our GeoTV universe of new and low propensity voters, most, if not all, who are people of color, we're talking to 500,000 people this year alone. Our partners are knocking on their doors, they're calling their home lines, but we've also purchased cell phones in this 500,000 universe. So we have these multiple touches to talk to people on the issue, mostly around economic justice, racial justice work, healthcare, and affordable childcare, right? And encourage them to turn out in the fall midterm election, right? I'm sure y'all know we have a governor's race here. And so we're like, this is the time to elect your representation. We use that as an opportunity, right? And that's already a power building mechanism, is increasing the turnout That's already a mechanism to build power in communities of color. But because we are already on the door having these conversations about the midterm elections, it provides us with a very sweet opportunity to begin talking about some of the census work, to begin talking about not just census by itself, but census and redistricting work. We've had an active redistricting campaign since, frankly, our first stab was last January of 2017 when we were able to stop a bad redistricting bill. Follow with this year where we've had 3 pretty large educational workshops with communities of color about how redistricting negatively impacts communities of color and reduces their power. So when we combine all those relationships and all those touches, it's just setting us up really well for 2019 and 2020 to have people in our community primed to then complete the census, but with an eye towards, right, what it means to have representation and what it means to have fair maps drawn. So the census is not happening in a conversation in isolation from other pieces of power building work.